Okay, so my name is Angel, and the topic for my action research project was Cognate instruction in elementary bilingual education. Okay, so the problem statement. The problem was derived from the understanding that there is an increase in emerging bilingual students, and since that's the case, there is also an increase for effective instructional strategies. There are many instructional strategies available, but the focus in this action research project was cognates, because cognates have been deemed as an effective teaching tool. Now, what was the problem that we were centering ourselves with during this research project? It was the exposure of cognates, meaning cognate instruction, and the lack of mathematical problem solving. So problem solving understanding. So the problem here is whether cognates deemed as being effective can help with that lack of understanding during math problem solving. What was the research question? Very specific. Can the use of cognates improve understanding of mathematical problem solving? So we wanted to see through this research project if cognates, the exposure to cognates, the instruction to cognates, had the potential impact in improving mathematical problem solving. That was the research question. Now, this is a question that needed more time to be answered, but there were some insights that we could talk about regardless through this presentation. So what were the literature review findings? What does the literature say? The literature does say that cognitive instruction, if it's delivered explicitly, can provide promising results. That means that it's intentional and it's planned. It's part of the lesson cycle or the learning environment. We also learned that cognitive instruction can increase reading comprehension, which is something that it's needed during math problem solving because there are different scenarios and especially vocabulary that students need to understand. And so reading comprehension and cognitive instruction, that relationship was critical to this action research project that literature has stated, and also the leveraging of linguistic resources. So the literature shows again and again that when we use those linguistic resources, what the child knows from their first language and transfers it to the second language, that leveraging of the linguistic resource can make it easier for the child to understand concepts that can be difficult in the second language. In this case, the second language is English and the first language is Spanish. What was the context of the study? Well, it was done with fourth grade students in a dual language classroom, a 50% model. And the methodology was an integrated research approach. We did have two forms of qualitative data, an interview and an observation, and we also had a survey, which counts as a quantitative form of data. The interview was with several students, a classroom observation during a math lesson, and a questionnaire that was given to several students too about cognates and their experience with them. Now, the data gathered from the observation did provide some insight. The first one indicated that cognitive instruction paired with visuals can be effective during math class. So the way it worked is we started the lesson. I questioned those students who usually don't participate. They didn't respond as usual. Then I provided cognate instruction, a mini lesson and several words that were part of the problem in math and that were labeled as cognates in a visual. That right away encouraged the students to participate. They found it easier to explain because they were able to get that background knowledge. They were able to make a connection and they were able to participate because of that resource provided. Yes, one of the students responded in Spanish because that's the strongest language. And one of the other students responded in a code switching manner But the important part here through this observation was that we were able to see a positive impact in these linguistic resources that we can provide to the students, which was cognates paired with visuals during math class. Now, the other data gathering was the interview, and this interview was done to see if we could find some cognitive awareness in students. So before I decided to implement a plan on cognates to start teaching cognates and implement them in my math block, I decided to get to have a little background from my students to see if they knew what cognates were or if they had heard about cognates before. Two important findings here. First, I did find out that cognates was not very popular amongst the students interviewed. They didn't know what cognates were, how they could use them. Some said that they were words in Spanish, words that rhyme, so it wasn't very clear. The second finding here was the fact that they did express that they struggled during math class in math problems because of the English vocabulary, signifying that cognates could be a potential way of helping these students understand. So through this interview and this classroom observation, I was able to see that it could be a very effective tool because you saw the increase in participation and you saw that expression of thoughts by the students saying that, well, we get confused because things are explained in English. We don't understand a lot of English. And so maybe we need a support, right? That's what I thought. Maybe they need a support and cognates can be that support that they need. Okay. So the next step from this interview was to monitor the positive effect through different activities, through different exposure, instruction to cognates. Now, what were the major noticings from this investigation, this action research? Well, students can benefit from cognitive instruction, but do need that explicit instruction. We cannot just say, oh, this is a refrigerator or refrigerador. You should know it. No, students need to have a journal. They need to have something where they can see, oh, this is a cognate. This is what I can use to understand this. They need background before that. You can just do it. So explicit instruction that can be planned for that particular lesson and situation. We also learned that cognates are not very recognizable, meaning that in this situation, not a lot of students know what cognates are. So that is a wake-up call to see, hey, maybe we're not providing, a lot of resources to these students. Like we really want to make sure that we focus in cognates because it's a very effective tool. And another major noticing is that students do think that language keeps them from being successful, which proves again that we can use your linguistic resources. So it comes back to what the literature said about, hey, cognates are words that sound similar in English and Spanish, and these students know a lot of Spanish. Let's find other cognates in Spanish that they can use during math instruction and apply them so that they can increase your reading comprehension. And so that was the part that we decided to look at through these noticings. Now, what implications does this have? Well, cognitive instruction can help with biliteracy development. That was one thing that we noticed through the action research, that not only cognates help the student that's struggling with math, but it also helps the student who's not perhaps struggling with math, but wants to develop that biliteracy. And so that comes to play when we talk about programs, the goals of a dual language program or that particular dual language program. Time constraints and already set curriculums, planning for cognates does take time. And so that would be a problem with curriculums that are so based on the standards of the state for a high stakes testing. And so sometimes providing that cognitive instruction cannot be the most practical thing to do, even though it can be effective with students. And of course, the implication here is the leveraging that we have of linguistic resources that we can use that sometimes we don't use in class because of different focuses. And so those are the three implications that we learned through this action research project that we just got a little glimpse of it, but we'll need to take time to see if Cognate instruction can be an effective tool for students. Okay, thank you.